your screen. So we're so glad to be able to offer that tonight. And with that, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Dr. Javed Siddiqui, who is the president and CEO of the Hunt Institute, to give some opening remarks. Javed?
Thank you, Dan, and good evening to all of our attendees, and welcome to this month's episode of Early Efforts. I want to first take a moment to thank you all again for joining us for our first evening Early Efforts webinar. We've introduced the evening webinar series to make it easier for teachers and policymakers and families to be able to participate. For our attendees tonight who are new to the Institute, I thought I'd take a moment to share. We were founded by our board chair, former four-term North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt, to support governors, state lawmakers, and other key policymakers across the U.S. on education policy issues. Tonight's conversation cuts across all of these audiences, and I know of special relevance to many of you working directly in early childhood classrooms. COVID-19 has changed the way our classrooms look and feel. And we know that teachers are having a difficult time. We spent years advising against screen time for young children, yet now have young children across the country being taught on screen. We have others in kindergarten classrooms that don't look like any we've ever seen, with 5-year-olds in masks, confined to desks, and prevented from outdoor play. It's definitely a challenge, so we felt like there's never been a better time to revisit developmentally appropriate practice. And we have an amazing panel here tonight to help us think through what it looks like under these very unique circumstances. Before we introduce our panelists, I wanted to extend our very special thanks to our partners who have helped us co-convene this event tonight: the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NAEYC, Council of Chief State School Officers, CCSSO, and AASA, the School Superintendents Association. Again, we're grateful for your partnership and your participation this evening. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Dan Worry. Dan is our Director of Early Childhood. He's doing a fantastic job, and really, this is another example of the impact he's having, and so thankful for him and his leadership. Dan.
Javed, thank you so much. And again, thanks to all of you for being here with us tonight. As Javed mentioned, we are living through a truly extraordinary time right now, and one during which we know that many early childhood classrooms around the country have been impacted and are looking, as Javed mentioned, very different than they have in the past. And so we feel like there has never been a better time for us to refocus our efforts and refocus the conversation onto developmentally appropriate practice. But even before we introduce the panelists, I want to begin tonight by sort of acknowledging the elephant in the room, and that is that there are many things happening right now for young children during this pandemic that, out of sheer necessity and with all the right and good intentions, simply are not developmentally ideal. And I think we would all put that on the table right up front. We know, we know that, but we also know that those of you who are working in classrooms are limited in some cases in what you are able to do. You are following the directives of your school administrators and in many cases, public health officials. So before we even get started with this conversation, I wanted to allow you the opportunity to sort of relieve yourself of any anxiety that you may have around that. In the short term, there may be things that you simply can't change, but our conversation tonight is really not about what we can't change. It's about what we can change. And so, given the current circumstances, what can we do to maximize the developmental appropriateness of the experiences that we're giving our young students? That's what we're here to discuss tonight. And I really couldn't be happier to have this amazing panel with us tonight. Beginning, I'll just quickly do a round of introductions and then come to you individually. Beginning though with with Tabitha Rossbroy of Winfield, Kansas. We are so excited to have Tabitha. You may know that Tabitha this year holds the distinction of being the very first ever preschool teacher to be named as the National Teacher of the Year. And so, Tabitha, we are just so delighted to have you with us and to have you as an ambassador to the early childhood world. We are also joined by Dr. Barbara Cooper, who serves under Governor Kay Ivey as Alabama's Secretary of Early Childhood Education. Secretary Cooper knows a thing or two about quality early childhood programs. Alabama's first-class pre-K program is one of only 4 states in the country that meets all 10 quality benchmarks that have been identified by the National Institute for Early Education Research, NEER. Michigan is another, Eddie, and we'll acknowledge Michigan as well. But Alabama holds a special distinction. They have met all 10 of those requirements now for the past 14 years, which is really tremendous. When we talk about developmentally appropriate practice, certainly the National Association for the Education of Young Children has long been the standard bearer on that topic, and we are so delighted tonight to have representing the NACCE Governing Board, Tamara Johnson, with us. Tamara is, in addition to being a member of the Governing Board, is also the director of the Malaika Early Learning Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where she serves preschoolers up through the primary grade, so sort of has a preschool and school principal hat that she gets to wear. And speaking of people wearing 2 hats, last but certainly not least, Superintendent Eddie Manuzak is joining us from Dundee, Michigan tonight. He is the superintendent of the Dundee Community Schools, but also the co-chair of the AASA's Early Learning Cohort, which is a really remarkable group of school superintendents from all across the country who are leading on early learning. So as you can tell from these introductions, we have just the right group assembled to be able to lead us along in this conversation. And so Tabitha, why don't we jump right into it? Again, I want to begin by offering our congratulations to you on this special honor, but I thought we would start this conversation really from the teacher's perspective, and I wanted to ask sort of a fundamental question to kick us off, which is, what do children need the most right now during this unusual time? And in that you are now spending a year sort of as an ambassador and speaking with teachers all across the country, what are you hearing from them, and what are you telling them about how to approach working with young children during this, very unusual period of the pandemic?
Well, first I just want to say thank you to the Hunt Institute for acknowledging how stressful this time is for not only for our teachers, but for our families and for our students. Their worlds have upended from changes in routine, loss of contact with loved ones, financial struggles, trying to juggle new responsibilities. However old you are, everyone's life is different right now. So our families and our students are deeply affected by this pandemic in very similar ways that teachers' lives are affected. So for our students doing distance learning, what I've been telling people, especially at the early grades, is what we need for them is family and home support. I did not know back in the spring just how valuable my experience with working with families would be, but it really shifted from being classroom teacher model to family coaching model, right? To helping set up boundaries and routines, helping motivate their young learners. But we also need to remember that we need reasonable expectations on families, and we need developmentally appropriate practices going on in the homes. And so right now, I think a lot of us are trying to really mimic what happens in a regular school day in a home to our students with distance learning. And we can set them up for success and help with those boundaries and routines and motivation, but it can still be developmentally inappropriate when you expect that kind of work in this kind of digital setting. So I think as administrators and as teachers, we need to be advocating for what we know is right for the age level and developmental level of our students. But for our students who are in person, because some are, and what I have heard is that they are handling wearing masks like champs. The school where I work and am still involved with as I can be while I'm traveling and speaking, I was super impressed. I was there on the first day of school and every kid had their mask on all day. And I just thought, we thought this was going to be the biggest hurdle, but it really, really has not been. I think the biggest hurdle is still finding ways to connect with our students and to make them feel safe. We have to follow new policies like masks where you can't see a teacher's face and you can't see the student's face. And so many of our connections rely on seeing each other's face, especially at an early age. And so I think that when we're, trying to keep distance, having our faces covered and trying to do things in a way that keeps us safe and healthy, that presents new challenges. Another thing that I've noticed is that most preschool programs around here are a half-day program. So that's 3 hours in school, and they have to have a mask break every 30 minutes, and they have to wash their hands every hour, on top of a classroom full of children who may or may not be potty trained, so are already going to the bathroom frequently, they're eating frequently, and so our learning time really is at risk when we are thinking about how many minutes per day are spent in transition or are spent doing those health things. And so I think that we have to be more creative with our time than we ever have been, utilizing those down times, walking in the hallway, moving, standing at the sink for learning. So our teachers are definitely facing some unique challenges, specifically in the early childhood world. But if I can end with one thing on this question, it would just to be to focus on relationships with your own students, with the kids in your home. The academic things will follow. Relationships are now and will always be the most important thing.
Well said. You can tell that she is the National Teacher of the Year, can you not? Secretary Cooper, let me turn to you. I know, within the Alabama's First Class Pre-K program right now, you have sort of a mixture of delivery methods that are happening right now. As you are looking and advising the providers across Alabama, how are you helping them to strike right now sort of the balance between what we know is important and kind of well-founded public health guidance, but balancing that against, making sure that our early childhood classrooms retain the things that we know are important for young kids?
Thank you so much, Dan, for having me to provide an opportunity to share this evening. And I'd like to just start by, first of all, thanking our teachers. We know that the real work is absolutely happening daily in our classrooms. In response to your question, the safety of children and staff is our #1 priority at the Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education. We have encouraged our team to review federal, state, and local guidance in reopening pre-K classrooms. We currently have 1,239 classrooms, and roughly 60% are providing traditional learning in the classroom, with the other 40% participating in virtual or hybrid learning models. In our extensive reopening guidance, and I will be sure to put in the chat a link to go and see all of the things that we have provided to support with reopening, we've included an entire section on reopening safely and what teachers and parents can do to make this possible. I do want to stress that we're not wavering on quality in our mixed delivery Alabama First Class Pre-K classrooms. When we first returned in May, we began having conversations with NEAR and really digging deeply and learning all of the things that we'd learned from March to August about how we can provide even more supportive guidance for our educators. We've heard from our teachers and our field staff, and we've responded accordingly by reiterating our expectations for high quality early learning environments. We've stressed to everyone that during the pandemic, we will continue to follow the Alabama First Class Pre-K framework, which includes all of the components that lead to the high quality programming that we've provided for 14 consistent years in Alabama. We are focused on student achievement, and as Tabitha stressed, the connections that have to be made between teachers and children and teachers and parents and children are absolutely the critical component for being able to continue this work. We've also really focused and shifted our professional learning to provide what our teachers need. So in addition to really focusing on safety, we're talking about what it means to actually teach in this virtual, hybrid, traditional environment that our teachers are faced with. And we are differentiating our coaching to be able to provide that support. So we already had tiered coaching, but now our reflective supervision piece is even more necessary, because as our teachers navigate this new world, they need that support. They need to know that they're going to be able to have the support to continue what needs to happen in the classrooms. And of course, we're looking at the parental components. This provides a new opportunity for parents to connect with their children, but we're recognizing that we absolutely must make sure that the family engagement opportunities that we are providing are actually what the parents need. So I think what we've learned most about this entire process is we have to go to our teachers, we have to go to our parents, we have to go to our staff to understand what they need. We can't just make these decisions high level and not really be responsive to what the field is needing to be supportive. So all of this has been created from March through October. We have a pretty comprehensive resource of guidance for our staff and our teachers. However, I do have to stress, this is an adaptive challenge. It's one that is taking us constantly looking at what we've provided in the way of guidance and being able to adapt very quickly to provide that ongoing support that is needed to continue to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Dr. Cooper, thank you so much. Tamara, let's talk about NACCE, because NACCE is, obviously the arbiter of developmentally appropriate practice, and you as a member of the governing board, I know, have been involved in conversations about what a unique time this is. Talk a little bit, and we'll let you sort of address this question wearing both of your hats. So maybe begin by talking to us a little bit about how is NACCE approaching this challenge, and what guidance has it been giving to teachers across the country as related to developmentally appropriate practice right now. And then maybe also then we'll let you switch into your preschool director and primary grade principal hat, and talk a little bit about what's happening at your school.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on this panel. Absolutely a pleasure to be able to give a perspective from two different lenses. So I will start with the NACCE lens and just say that developmentally appropriate practice has been at the heart of the work that we do at NACCE. So absolutely a natural fit for us to respond in the ways that we have as an organization. The DAP position statement is being revised and will be coming soon. And we actually, in that process of developing or revising that position statement, really are taking the same process we did with developing the advance and equity statement. So that same process for DAP revisions, we'll walk through that exact same process, as well as use a lot of what we developed in the advance and equity statement to inform the revisions for developmentally appropriate practices for the new position statement. And in the words of our colleague and friend, Barbara Willer, we sit in this position or in these seats with the DAP revisions and think to ourselves, everything has changed and nothing has changed. So as we move through the revisions for DAP, what I would absolutely ask of teachers in the field is to look out for the opportunities to give feedback, because I do think now is a crucial time. As almost everyone on this panel knows, and a few have mentioned, things have changed. We lived in the world of no screen time, and now we're at a place where everything seems to be screen time. So absolutely would welcome the input from teachers and others in that, the revisions of that statement. Some of the other things I know that the organization has done, we've been very, very cognizant of how COVID-19 affected everyone. And so there have been free webinars, the conferences have been free for the most part, lots of professional development opportunities for everyone to participate in at no cost. And I think that has been extremely helpful for not only members of our association, but as well as those who are just in the field or in a supportive field. Whether it be home visiting or other fields, they've had an opportunity to utilize the resources that NACCE has to offer. With the recent release of our advance and equity statement, I will tell you, the first thing I thought about when COVID-19 hit was, boy, was the timing everything for the release of that statement. Just the intersection between COVID-19 and the social justice issues that are going on, I think now, in our sector, we have an opportunity to go to that position statement and really digest what is written or the text that's there and related to the work that we do, or the work that we should be doing, or the work that others should be doing, and kind of can help advise them through that. So again, for the Advancing Equity Statement, I couldn't think of a better time than now in promoting equality that statement came out as it did. Those were kind of bigger picture things. Some of the detail or smaller, not smaller, but some of the teacher supports that are more direct or tangible. We've developed, if you look on the NACCE website there and go to the search engine, you can type in DAP in COVID times and get lots of information and resources that are extremely helpful for classroom, for center-based, for leadership, everything. There's also some toolkits and resources that are provided on the website and free. Again, I love free. But then there's also a page that is just specifically on coping with COVID. And I think there are tons of resources there, but I think what the association has done that I'm extremely proud of is the fact that they are just front and center, calling these things out. It's not, there's no fluff. It is what it is, and we are addressing that. Another avenue for teachers is our interest forums. There are interest forums where that are particular content or topic driven, and to have open dialogue with your colleagues, I think right now is crucial for teachers, especially those who are in municipalities that are giving guidance that we know goes against some of the things that we've always known were appropriate for children and families. So that it's an opportunity for them to engage in some conversation and even take some of those ideas back to those municipalities who are making those decisions without talking to us first, to kind of have some ground to come back with and inform those who aren't informed about our work. Another thing I can't stress enough to teachers is absolutely, if you have an opportunity to utilize the publications that NACCE has put out, the past 4 months have been crucial. I think the publication team has probably lost a lot of sleep, but I will tell you, we are grateful for that team and the resources that they've been able to push out to the field. And then last but not least, and definitely this is not an exhaustive list of things for teachers, but Hello is also a platform. It's an online platform that I think is very useful. Again, it's open dialogue and discussion just about any topic imaginable. And I think it lends itself for folks to be themselves or just have those conversations that they may not be able to have in their own workplace or in their own community. So I would definitely encourage teachers to utilize Hello as well. So now I'm going to switch to my Maleka hat. And I'll say having to wear that hat daily, where I have children in our building as early as 6 weeks, and then we provide childcare and school. So we go through 3rd grade here at Maleka. We start at 6 weeks and go through 3rd grade. Definitely has been a challenge in relation to not only programming and leadership, but for teachers. When guidelines come out that are contradictory to one sector than it is the other, meaning childcare can function this way, but school can't function that way. For us, that's really hard at Maleka because our programming all happens in one building and we are a cohesive team. So to have those different rules and regulations for childcare versus school and all that has been quite challenging for myself as a leader, as well as for the morale of teachers as well. I will tell you, for the adjustments that we needed to make for COVID, we tried to keep things as normal as possible. We truly understand that children and families were stressed out to begin with because everything seemed to just change. Life changed, relationships changed. So we tried our hardest to keep things as normal as possible. I think Tabitha hit the nail on the head. The thing that has been really challenging or hardest for us at Maleka is relationships, because we are a very small organization and we function in a village mentality. We give hugs, and hugs physically are nowhere nearly as good as air hugs. I mean, I love to be able to hug people. So that air hug just doesn't feel real to me. But things like that, all of the things that we know we've built into our Maleka way and relationship building with our children and families isn't gone as we know it. We've established those relationships, but it just seems different now. Some of the adjustments for programming, of course, the same things that most programs have had to do. Our arrival and departure is very different. Parents are not able to come in the building. Non-essential visitors don't visit. Our outdoor play times are different. Enrollment we had to decrease to keep our distance and making sure that the classrooms are safe and our meal time. So lots of changes kind of in programming. I will tell you, I'm very impressed. There were things that we've discussed as a team and that we started out in June a certain way. And then as we progressed through, thought of different creative ways. As Tabitha said, we've learned to be extremely creative. We were already creative, but now it's challenging our creativity in a different way. Some of the things that we've done specifically for teachers or as a team, we are looking at self-care very different. We haven't done as well probably in this field of taking care of ourselves because we're taking care of lots of other folks. But I will tell you, we are having some really heart-to-heart conversations about taking care of ourselves lately. Doing our check-ins different, talking about things like soul exhaustion and anxiety, and realizing that anxiety comes in different forms, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed. We're starting to recognize what that looks like. And then just being flexible in the moment. I'll tell you, I'm extremely proud of our team as well as teachers across the country because they are making it happen, regardless of whatever curveballs are coming their way. I've seen things within our own program, our local programs, other states, as I see lives or different videos, they're really showing up and showing out. That's, that's how I describe it for teachers. They are rising to the occasion, but I want us to be very, very cognizant of the fact that they're rising to the occasion with absolutely need to take care of themselves. So that's why in our program in particular, been really trying to push the self-care and taking care of ourselves. And then one last thing I wanted to talk about in relation to teachers and children is, we work really hard within the four walls of our space, whether it be school, childcare, or at home, to teach children to be kind and to be peaceful and to love one another. And they are seeing being mean and unfair at a level I think they have probably never seen before in their lives. And so I think it's really important that as they view it more, we understand what life looks like through their lens. Because we teach it, it happens within the four walls, but then they go out in a world or in society that is teaching them the complete opposite. So when things show up in children, we have to acknowledge and hear and see that for what it's worth. And we, as adults in classrooms with children, pay attention to what that looks like and how to mitigate some of that. So really for us, that means we need to listen and hear different in a different way than I think we've ever had to before.
Tamara, thanks.
No.
Eddie, let's jump over to you, and you like Tamara sort of can speak to this topic wearing two hats. Obviously, you are working directly with teachers and with school elementary school principals and in your school district, but you're also connected with this great network of superintendents across the country. So talk a little bit about from your perspective, how are school systems handling the challenge now of developmentally appropriate practice amidst COVID, and how are the needs of your youngest students being taken into account right now?
Yeah, no, Dr. Worry and Dr. Siddiqui, thank you so much for having me on this amazing panel. I am just in awe of the others that are on this and so excited to be a part of this. And as a former kindergarten teacher, I can truly understand the challenges that our classroom teachers are experiencing. And I am inspired. I just cannot say that enough. The teachers across the nation, I know within my own school district in Dundee Community Schools, it is truly an amazing experience to see them in action. And so across the nation, I know that schools are in very different spots. I know that there are many schools that are just now transitioning from either they're still in their remote learning and then moving into potentially a hybrid situation. And then there are actually some schools that are 5 days a week face-to-face learning with proper PPE and proper social distancing and trying to make it work. So really it is as individualized as it can be. And I know that all of my colleagues that are in these roles and helping their schools and the communities transition back into learning are doing everything they can to bring their students back safely. And so one of the things that I know that I've been a part of is the discussion points on, what does some of that look like? And it really does come down to, how big of a class can you have come back safely? And, that gets back to the whole NAOIC developmentally appropriate practice guideline on, class size, right? And so in my current district, we have 85% of our student population chose to come back in our hybrid option model. And so we had 15% choose the whole online model. So I have two days a week, Monday and Tuesday, cohort A comes, and then on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, it's a remote learning day for those students. And then on Wednesday, Thursday, cohort B comes in person, so that on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, they come and they're in a remote learning situation. So we tried to offer 2 consecutive consistent days. And so one of the really neat things that I was so impressed with was, and this is a shout out to, and it's, October is National Principal Month. So if you are in any form connected to a school district where there are principals, it's time to honor them. And so our elementary principal and our assistant principal, we had thought of this idea of, because, you have these restrictions, right? You're trying to insulate your building. You're trying to keep your building so there's not as many touch points of people coming in. So we, adopted some of those guidelines where we're very open. We want visitors, but unfortunately now is not the best time to have that. And so we actually came up with a plan to have a staggered start. And so with our hybrid option, we actually had smaller class sizes. And so especially for those students that were coming back, and I know this is happening around the nation right now, you've got to take into consideration how overwhelming it is for little ones to come back. And it's so important for those teachers to connect with them remotely, just to be able to see their face. Like, I can see all of your beautiful smiles right now and say, this is awesome. We're not wearing a mask. And I get to see how everyone looks. That is so important. So make sure there's a touch point before they physically come. And then if you can arrange it, make sure that those parents or those guardians that are with those little ones when they come can actually come in your building with them. If you have to heighten your cleaning, do it. And I know that my small district that I have about 1,800 students, we're just a tiny little rural district just south of Ann Arbor, but in just about an hour outside of Detroit, we have spent over $1 million in our COVID preparedness. And if you can do those things to make the difference, it eases the transition so well. Because then we have kids that were coming in excited to be there. Their mom or their dad or their grandma, grandpa, or a trusted adult was with them when they were walking in. And that made all the difference to help them, because tears happen in Young Fives. Tears happen in Great Start, our 4-year-old statewide program. And tears happen in Head Start. Tears happen in kindergarten. Tears happen in first grade even. So we tried to make sure that that transition was as appropriate as we could be. So I think that that is a really big overlooked issue right now in public schools and in schools around the nation. And we really need to be mindful of that. Sometimes the easiest things are not always the easiest things, right? You have to dedicate time and resources and energy into that. And the other thing I want to really touch on too is the whole equity piece. And I know, Tamara, you really hit you did a great job with that in talking about, and I really appreciate NACY's ability to be a leader in that. And so the AASA, the part of the group that I'm a part of on a nationwide level, there's an equity thread now through every one of the leadership teams that are a part of this organization. And so later this month, and I'll put the link in the chat, on October the 22nd, we have a early learning equity symposium. And it's 3 hours, it's action-packed. You have things that are happening that practitioners like who are on the call tonight, or administrators, or others that they can learn from. And so I feel like what NACCE has done, AASA is doing for us as well as what you are doing tonight, Dan, with the Hunt Institute, offering resources, offering conversations on what is best. So hopefully that answers the question. I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, I'm so glad you raised the equity issue, because it's where I wanted to bring us before we get into some of the more nuts and bolts of kind of the I can tell you from a lot of teachers who want to talk about outdoor play, about centers, about online. So we're gonna get to that level of detail here in a moment. But I do think it's important to acknowledge the equity issues that COVID is raising right now. I mean, something as simple as the assumption that that many kids are going to be learning online, aside from the developmental questions about the appropriateness of that, there is an equity question here, and an understanding that there continues to be sort of a digital divide in terms of access to hardware, access to high-speed internet connectivity. And a host of other equity questions. So let me just throw open to the group. Anybody feel free to jump in. How are you in your situation helping to address some of those equity issues?
This is Tamara. I'll go ahead and go first. I know that was one of our worries right away. Again, we're a small nonprofit organization, so we have not been fortunate enough for every student to have their own means of technology, even in the classroom. What we did right away was look for resources. I applied for a couple of grants. The philanthropic world here in Milwaukee has been outstanding in understanding those equity issues and that digital divide. So a lot of them stepped up to the plate and provided lots of resources in the community. So we had opportunities to apply for grants, so that all of our students did get technology to take home, as well as other resources that they would need. And not just the equipment, but the training. Our curriculum coordinator has been outstanding with supporting families through the challenges of using the technology, because we thought, some folks think giving the technology helps mitigate some of that, but the use of it was extremely challenging for some. We have some households or some students where grandparents are taking care of them. So that was a little bit challenging, but I will tell you, again, our foundations and some of the folks in the community stepped up and really helped with those resources.
Great. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I would also add, Dan, that we've been very purposeful in Alabama about trying to really address the equity issues that have been posed as a result of the pandemic. Some of the things that we've done is our governor, thankfully, is a huge proponent of early childhood education, and it's definitely a bipartisan concern and challenge here that we all fully support. So we've requested CARES funding and was able to provide digital resources for our teachers to make sure that they had true two-way communication, learning management systems. We wanted to make sure that teachers did not have to spend all of their time trying to learn what it really meant to operate in this virtual environment. So now they have a whole suite of resources that they can pull from so that their focus can really be about creating those connections that are so critical between the children and their families. We also utilized our Born Ready platform, which is an outreach platform for our families to really send tips every day so that parents are getting tips the way they'd like to get tips about how they can engage their young children, and not just the pre-K children, but children 0 all the way up through the middle school years, to really be able to hone in on what they can be doing to try to mitigate some of these situations. And then we used our Alabama Broadband Connect to request that these resources be made available, vouchers, so that pre-K parents could also request these services that are being provided K-12. And early on in the pandemic, our pre-K children were not initially eligible to receive the additional benefit to get the lunches that they would be available to receive had they been in school. So we reached out to make sure that that equity issue was addressed as well. I think as educators, we have to look at more than just the educational inequities that are there, but the social inequities. We expanded our mental health services, infant and early childhood mental health, to be able to provide services for children in all 67 counties by placing a mental health specialist to really address the early needs. So we're trying to tackle this from a holistic view and make sure that we absolutely are meeting the needs that are necessary to have a full child that is well in all aspects.
That's great.
I'd like to add one thing, if that's okay. This isn't really a solution, and I apologize, but I think it is really important to highlight that social inequity, because I feel like we're really good at coming on strong on the offense on the educational equity. But what I think some communities are still facing, and I want people to hear that on this call, is that, we have families who still have to go to work, regardless of whether we're in hybrid or remote learning or not. And we just simply do not have enough childcare facilities, centers, or in-home to manage that. And so then what is happening is unsafe situations for our children are unsupported. And so public schools were founded on providing equity and access in our community. And I feel like now we're unable to provide that same access to a caregiver, right? Someone to be with you and to guide you through that learning. And families may be unable to provide that too. And so as you continue these conversations in your communities, I would just encourage you to be an advocate for those families in those situations as much as you can.
Tabitha, I want to jump at this point to we fielded so many questions about how do you make online learning appropriate for young kids? I mean, it is really sort of the $1 million question in this conversation. At least, in classroom settings where we're socially distanced, they may look a little different, but they aren't as radically different as what students are experiencing who are receiving pre-K, for example, online at this point. And you started this conversation by talking about the importance of relationships, and I feel like that's been a common thread across a lot of your, a lot of the panel's comments. Help us think through on a practical level. What advice do you have for the teachers that are watching right now in terms of how you nurture those relationships that you might have otherwise done in the classroom in this online format?
I would say something that I always say to educators is that teaching is about 90% theater. And I think that that is especially true when you are on a remote learning platform. So I believe in this in the classroom all the time. I have a history in theater and improv comedy, and so I feel like this serves me pretty well in the classroom. But do not be afraid to be a fool on the screen. Okay, in one way, it keeps kids' attention and it helps you stay connected to them. What is the most boring thing that puts my nephews to sleep when I keep them? The Weather Channel, right? And I'm sorry to the Weather Channel people, but when you think about how muted and monotone and the content being delivered is not something super interesting to them. So I try to just be opposite of that, right? And again, my apologies to the Weather Channel. I try to be, in a way, just that super engaging presence from behind a screen. And I see teachers rocking that. I see sort of behind the scenes footage of them doing everything they can, full body motion, trying to keep their kids engaged. But that is one big thing. Don't be afraid to be a little bit foolish, but also be aware of when your students need a break, right? There's some, it's just not appropriate. I don't love being on an hour-long Zoom. I don't know anybody that does. You have to break it up and do different chunks. Now, it's going to be really hard to keep attention when people are moving away and coming back, but it is worth the time to set up those expectations that you have of them, because it's going to pay off in the amount of learning that takes place. Again, just have fun. The kids are going to know when they see your face if you're excited to see them or if you're frustrated or angry about something else that happened that day. Be as present as you can from behind the screen.
I love the way you describe that, and I think you raised one of the points that I wanted to raise tonight too, which is just how remarkable. I mean, leave it to early childhood teachers to get through just about anything. I mean, it's so, I think back to sort of the beginning of the summer. Eddie, you and I had a conversation, months ago on a different webinar where we were expressing some anxiety around how this was all going to work, right? That, kids, think of being a 5-year-old and coming to school for the first time, going into, you already have this anxiety of going into the strange building and interacting with strange adults, but now they're all in masks and you can't see their faces. And so, and I will say, I was guilty. I think I might have been expressing maybe the most angst that day around, to Tabitha's point, how important it is to create those relationships in advance. But I have to say, from watching, even from afar on social media, the strategies that I have seen early childhood teachers use are just amazing. I think I mentioned there was and I wish I could credit this teacher, but she had a photo that was online. She was wearing a mask, was wearing a shield over the mask. So her face was almost entirely obscured, but she had a t-shirt made with a photograph of herself smiling and an arrow pointing up to her head that said, "It's me," right? And so I just marvel at the ingenious ways that that early childhood teachers always manage to make things okay for young kids. It's something that I love about the profession. Eddie, jump in.
Yeah, no, Dan, I just want to jump in because I couldn't agree more with our National Teacher of the Year with Tabitha. What superintendent has a groundhog puppet? I don't know, but the groundhog can read a story on the computer, right? And that gets kids to engage and be smiling and having a good time. And I just know that that's so important. And the other thing that we're really good at is we're borrowing ideas or sharing ideas from others. And so there's a link that I'm going to put in the chat, and it's from U of M researcher, Dr. Nell Duke. And she is a phenomenal resource for early literacy. And she has developed a series of videos, and one of the videos I'll put in there is just small group reading online. How do you do it, right? And how are you going to prepare for it? And so it's just one thing that I think that we are very resourceful. And I count myself as an early childhood folk. I'm a member of the NAYC and the AASA. So I get it. I mean, we're trying to do things as we come to them and see them. And it's really about being adaptable. So it's important.
Tamara, jump in.
Yep, I was just going to say, I absolutely agree with all of those points. The one thing I think, to Tabitha's point about being put in theater and different dramatics into your virtual instruction or other instruction comes very key with playing games. We play games with kids in classrooms all the time, but I think given the virtual experience, one of the things I've seen some of our teachers do is play a lot of scavenger hunt types of things are happening, and it allows for that connection between, again, school and home and learning opportunities and how learning can take place right at home. Even though we're on this virtual learning experience or virtual journey, but I think that playing games and having those scavenger hunts have been helpful as well.
Secretary, I know, some of your first class pre-K is using remote online instruction. What are you hearing from schools on how that's going, and what have they found to be particularly successful?
Yes, we absolutely have continued to keep those lines of communication open with schools. And one of the things that we have really tried to focus on, and our advice to our teachers is to focus on the content, the child, and the time frames. We've really tried to help them to understand that similar to what happens in the pre-K classroom, the content should be relevant to children's real world experiences and specifically geared towards any identified interests children and families have expressed. We've tried to stay in contact and ensure that those conversations are ongoing. We've conducted surveys and done other things that allows us to continuously, as I shared earlier, make those adjustments as needed. I totally agree with what Tabitha has shared with regard to teachers are entertainers, and they are doing it every day. If you follow them on places such as hashtag pre-K continues in Alabama, you'll see teachers with their guitars. I mean, you see these bigger than life experiences that are coming to life through a screen. And as I will tell anyone, if it can be done, a pre-K teacher can get it done. So I had no concerns with regard to whether or not we would realize how important it was to continue to make those connections with our children as we started to navigate the pandemic. And I'm confident that we will continue to do just that as we take a look at how we've been able to progress.
So let's pivot a little bit. We've talked a little bit about the online experience that many kids are receiving, but we also know that for those kids who are going back in person, their experiences vary very much by location. In some classrooms, I think kindergarten is going on, largely as it has, other than we're washing our hands more often, we're wearing a mask, but have also seen plenty of examples of districts that have taken the approach of replacing the standard kindergarten experience now with rows of desks that are 6 feet apart and surrounded by plexiglass barriers, and the center time, for example, means you pick out some sort of learning material that you're going to interact with, and you bring it right back to your desk and you use it independently. So talk a little bit about, Eddie, how are you dealing with in-person instruction in the early years, and what advice would you offer to teachers who are maybe in those very restrictive situations in terms of how they can make the most of that?
Well, it's our district had made the conscious choice that because of the learning groups that we were able to create, they were smaller by design. And so we also then took the step to say we're going to be hiring more custodians to clean. And so we still do allow centers in our district, but everything, there's not a lot of sharing of materials when they're in those centers. We try and keep that very isolated so that it does not have that, and then it gets cleaned so that every day. I know that some districts, when they're in a hybrid option plan, they'll say, oh, we'll use the day that everyone is remote learning as our deep clean day. You need to deep clean every day, right? It's not going to work if you don't deep clean every day. And so you have to do that. You have to make that conscious commitment, and your district has to. But for those individuals, because there are a lot of our colleagues around the nation right now that are in those very restrictive environments, it really is about how can I apply what I know, what I believe is best in those moments where I can see it happening. Everyone understands what artful, masterful teaching looks like. You choose to make lemonade out of lemons. And so if you have that situation and scenario, then explore your environment the best you can. I have never seen more teachers get more creative with, especially in parts of the nation where it's still warm and you can be outside. Use the outdoors as much as you can. That's nature's best disinfectant during COVID. I mean, I've seen more creative teaching being done outside than I've ever seen before. And I just want to encourage that, because that's really something that is underutilized. So make sure you're talking to your administrator or your person that's your supervisor and say, hey, would it be okay if I, because that gets back to kind of the Reggio Emilia philosophy of, making sure you're using your environment and using that as a teaching tool. And I think that's so important for all of our colleagues around the nation that are doing this. And I think that's so important because we have to be creative in approaching those aspects creatively. So I would just remind everybody that don't allow the confines of your environment to dictate how you're going to teach your students. You have to make sure you're being creative, and then use those resources, use those things. And then the last thing I just want to point out, and this comes back to the whole idea, and I know, Dan, you and Dr. Siddiqui co-authored a great article, and I'm the one promoting you now because you guys, Maslow before Bloom's, right? You've got to make sure those needs are being met. And that gets back to what Tamara said earlier. got to take care of those staff. You got to make sure you're taking care of your staff, and that's really important in those environments as well. So remember to do those check-ins with your staff if they are stressed, if they're anxious, it always helps to take those precious moments to ask them how they're doing. So hopefully that answers the question.
Tamara, how are your students handling things like centers at this point?
Yep. So same thing as Eddie has already mentioned is our class sizes are small enough to where we still keep our centers open. We are just doing some higher intensified cleaning. And so, you know, whereas it's always been crucial that you rotate toys or rotate books or rotate this or those types of things are just happening much more frequently than they were before. And like Eddie said, we're trying to keep things as normal as possible. So the biggie has been class sizes are just a little bit smaller. Centers are still open. Teachers are diligent in watching the traffic flow in classrooms as well as cleaning.
Tabitha, are you hearing from teachers on this topic, concerns around sort of what they might consider to be inappropriate practices brought on by the pandemic?
Yes, I'm definitely hearing different ends of the spectrum, right? My district personally has really invested in air filtration and those systems like HEPA filters and keeping a window open and a fan and the door open and, you know, making sure that the air is safe. And they have had some allowances in working with our local health department on decreasing the distancing as long as students are wearing masks, right? So I feel like what's going on in our preschools is a lot more developmentally appropriate than I'm hearing about in some other cases, because our kids are still doing centers every day and they're, you know, sharing materials with maybe one or two other students, and those all materials are being disinfected every single day after every use. But it's more like pod style, right? And our numbers have also decreased. Like we're not going over 10 in a class, and some are as low as 6 or 7, and some are right at 10. And so that does help with the distancing. But when you're in a 30 by 30 classroom and you have furniture, there's only so many places that you can go. And so we're really relying on kids wearing those masks, our air filtration, and that sanitation. But I have a friend who teaches at a school in one town over from me, teaches kindergarten, and her class is sitting. Everything they have to do is at their desk, you know, those individual tubs coming back. And she's really struggling with that, not only to keep her kids engaged, but to have enough materials, because we really rely on sharing. We share amongst our friends in our building. We share with kids every day, community supplies. And so that's another area. Kids need hands-on learning. And when you can't buy all of the materials at Lakeshore and Discount School Supply, but I am willing to have a partnership with you guys if you hear this. But you just can't do that, right? There's just not enough money to take care of all of that. And so it's definitely some unique challenges, and definitely even within the same 10 miles, towns are doing things differently.
All kinds of school supply vendors are going to be calling you tomorrow. So brace yourself. Secretary Cooper, how about first class pre-K? How are you? Have you given guidance for those programs that are meeting in person in terms of how to approach things like centers? Secretary, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, we have, Dan, and this happens to be one of the frequently asked questions that we issued a response to in our teacher FAQ guide. So in that information I put in the chat, that information is there. But basically, our guidance related to classroom centers has been individualized based on heightened health and safety measures adopted by the local program administrators. So of course, we're going to have some variability as well. In some classrooms, the amount of materials in centers at any given time has been minimized to allow daily rotation and sanitations. And in other classrooms, there have been very few adjustments at all made. But again, it's been very individualized. Fortunately, the Department of Early Childhood is proud to have a team of region coaches who've been able to work directly with those classroom teachers as often as needed to really support the local decisions around what needs to happen. But centers are a critical part of the pre-K classroom, as well as children being able to interact. So we've tried to model that as much as appropriate with developmentally appropriate practices, but again, keeping in line with what's safest and what the best guidance is around being able to support that in the classrooms.
That's great. You know, I started this conversation with sort of the elephant in the room of, because it's interesting. We heard from teachers as we were even promoting the availability of this webinar, and there was some concern around, what's this panel going to say about developmentally appropriate practice, and might they, might you as our panel recommend things that would be at odds with district guidance or public health guidance in the state. And so, I do think it is important just to say one more time, teachers are making it work. And there are certain things that you're just not going to be able to change right now. But with that said, with the caveat that we started on that note, I know when we all connected sort of in a pre-call for this webinar, we talked a little bit about how a teacher might go about raising appropriate concerns to administrators with a mind toward possibly seeing what could be done and what flexibility might there be, and how could things that are maybe being forbidden be loosened up and done safely. So I'm curious to know, from your perspectives, you've all worked in multiple different roles here. How would you advise a teacher in that situation? Let's say hypothetically, we won't pick any particular thing, but a teacher is being required by a district to do something that feels very inappropriate developmentally for the age of the children. How would you advise that they sort of raise that up the flagpole?
If I can start on that, I would like to, Dan. Well, I will tell you what I've learned since March is that there are lots of folks making decisions about early childhood classrooms that have never worked in an early childhood classroom or don't have a clue what happens on a daily. So I think part of that is having that conversation and really explaining, showing what DAP is all about, or how those rules and those regulations could mesh well with what we do in the classroom. I think a lot of the challenges or the hurdles I felt with local municipalities making decisions was the fact that they just don't know what we do. So they've made decisions based on health or their expertise, but not having had the conversation with folks who are doing the work. So if I could say anything to teachers who are looking for that support or looking to kind of change or do what's right and want others to know what's right, I think letting folks know what we do on a daily and how important those specific things are to the growth and development of children is really important.
Dan, I would just add to that one of the things we did when we first recognized we needed to create guidance was form a partnership with our K-12 system, so the Alabama State Department of Education. So I think it was very critical that our former secretary met with Superintendent Mackey to start that conversation so that we created complementary guidance so that we weren't having ADECE teachers, pre-K teachers follow one set of guidance that was controversy to what their K-12 system was providing. So I think by making our guidance be complementary to one another, that has been helpful. And as we continue to develop that guidance, we've tried to keep them alongside us so that as we push things out, we're making sure that the elementary schools where pre-K classrooms reside are understanding what is developmentally appropriate. And frankly, we encourage our teachers to tell us if they're being asked to do things that are developmentally inappropriate. For instance, we had people saying, well, we're going to put desks in classrooms. And we thought, not in our pre-K classrooms. You will not put desks. You will not remove all of the carpets. You will not move those things that make that classroom a true pre-K classroom. We absolutely support safety and guidance around safety, but we want to do it in developmentally appropriate ways. And I think just forming that partnership has helped us be able to do that in a way that's not as disruptive to both environments.
I'm going to add one thing just because I would have closed on this anyway. Kansas is great at elevating teacher voice, and that trickles down into some of our districts, not all of them. We were educators. We led the continuous learning plan and the reopening plan, this year. But what I want to say is don't be afraid as an educator. Your administrators were teachers too. They are people who want to do things the best for kids. I think that there's, always this huge divide, like admins versus teachers, but that's not really the way it works. We're all working towards the same goal. So I would say definitely just bring things up to them. Don't go over their heads. Go right to your boss first. I think that's most, appropriate in any kind of relationship. But come with some data, like everyone else has said. Like, come with the guidelines from NACCE and say this is what they're recommending for children. Do you think that we could, meet our kids' needs better? Do it in that way, because I learned this from the Kansas Leadership Center. Leadership is an activity. It is not a position. Any one of you can be a leader, and teachers, it is up to you right now. People are looking at us, all eyes are on us, whether we like it or not. And so use this time to advocate for what you know is best, because we might not get many more of these opportunities to do that. So just keep raising your voice.
So Dan, can I add something to it? So this just shows you what kind of early childhood nerd I am, right? I have a book from the 1992-93 comprehensive NACCE series called Teaching in the Key of Life by Mimi Bronsky-Chainfield. And she immediately came to my mind when you said this, because there's a passage in here called There's a Wolf at Your Door. And you need to learn to speak bilingually. You need, as a classroom teacher, to be able, like our National Teacher of the Year, Tabitha just said, you've got to articulate, you've got to fight fiction with facts. You've got to know your stuff so well so that when your administrator comes in and they yell at you because your groundhog is giving a spelling test instead of you need to say, by the way, this is a developmentally appropriate practice because, and then that goes right back into COVID practices, right? We need to make sure that you are being safe, as Secretary Cooper has said, safety before everything, because we care, I know I care so much about all of you and all of our teachers in my district and around the nation. We don't want anything to happen to you. So make sure you do that. And then the final thought is, what comes to my mind is the late John Lewis's, it's okay to be in good trouble.
I love it. And I think, the gist here is, bring the facts, be knowledgeable and presenting your situation and your request. But then I think going back to where we started, recognize that this is an extraordinary time, and that, that these are, none of these are requirements that are being put in place because people, want the wrong things for young kids. These are all being done in the name of safety, and it may be that they're being done in the name of safety by people who maybe don't have this experience that you do. And so bringing forward that knowledge, but then also being flexible and recognizing, what can be changed and what can't be changed. During this time is really important. I know we're kind of winding down here on time. One thing I do want to say, for those of you who are joining us tonight, for whom even the term developmentally appropriate practice may be, a relative or a new bit of vocabulary, really want to direct you to the National Association for the Education of Young Children. They have published, over a series of years, manuals on, what is developmentally appropriate for children at different ages. As Tamara mentioned, they're in the process of revising that, so I'm excited that we'll soon have a new version of the DAP manual, but also just, as a sort of a repeat shout out from what Tamara mentioned, NACCE has recently done a really lovely piece that sort of delves into some of these issues about what developmentally appropriate practice looks like during COVID-19. And so if you want more resources on this particular topic, I definitely recommend that you head over to their website and check those things out. As we wrap up tonight, I want to give an opportunity for each of you, kind of in closing, to share maybe what is the most important piece of advice and maybe you've already offered it, but one more opportunity to say, what is the most important piece of advice that you would like to offer the teachers who are watching us right now as they are navigating through this difficult time? And maybe Secretary Cooper, could we start with you? And you're muted.
Thank you, Dan. The advice that I would offer is this is a time, we are living in a time that we've never lived in before and experiencing things that are new to us all. The social and health pandemic that we're dealing with are dueling almost as we speak. I think it's just critical that as educators, as leaders, that we find our voice. This is an opportunity for us to stand for something. And that something is being the voice for those children that we've spoken about tonight that are living these inequities. We have to be the person to actually say, it's not okay the way we've been doing things. This is our opportunity to reimagine education. It's an opportunity to reimagine our health system, but it's an opportunity, most importantly, for us to align every resource we have to maximize those resources and use them to the fullest so that children benefit and ultimately our economy and our nation will benefit from the things that we do around these pandemics that we're experiencing currently.
Secretary, thank you. Tamara, you want to go next?
Yes, mine is short and sweet. I just would say offer patience, grace, kindness to yourself and to the children and families, because I think that's what we need right now.
Thank you. Eddie.
Well, I know that first and foremost, my heart goes out because I've been kind of toggling between the questions that are in this question Q&A, and there are just so many awesome questions. So maybe, I don't know, I would be willing to do this, but I just know if we could somehow turn that into an FAQ, and maybe we could give input later, I would be willing to donate my time to answer some of those questions, and we can put out an FAQ, because each one of you that are on the call tonight, as you know, Tabitha has shared, you are the champions. You are the leaders, every one of you. And so I believe that from our perspective, and this is something that I know all of us are working toward, is your zip code should not define the education that your child receives. And that is a problem that we are dealing with in our nation currently. And we do not and should not ever stop until that is not even an issue. And so I just know that that is not a pie in the sky issue. That is what I refer to as a AC practice, an after COVID practice that we can tackle together with advocacy, with coordination, with people that are really working hard in all of our respective roles and really coming together to make differences. So don't give up on that. And then the one thing too that we didn't really get to touch on is if you're dealing with a situation that you have where especially our most vulnerable students that are identified needing special services or special ed services, you know, that's also a huge area that we didn't get to talk about tonight. But I just know that that is one of those things that I would be willing to donate my time to answer some FAQ stuff on. So keep up all the hard work that each of you are doing. You matter, and that's all.
Well, Eddie, thank you, and I love that idea. In fact, I have just copied and pasted the entire chat, which is lengthy. So prepare to be volunteering a lot of your time. But let's see if we can, if maybe we couldn't follow up on exactly that that idea, because I do feel like we've gone for what, an hour and 15 minutes tonight, and I do feel like on this topic there is so much interest and so many different questions that, gosh, we've just hardly even been able to scratch the surface. Tabitha, as our National Teacher of the Year, I want to give you the final word on this topic. Give us your advice to the teachers that are watching right now.
You know, you've probably seen this circulating around social media. You know, the most dangerous words in the English language are, but we've always done it this way. And so what I keep telling people when they're scared to speak up or when they're not sure what to do is that you can love something a whole lot and still want it to change and grow. So as educators, we have the responsibility to learn from the past, but we also have the responsibility to serve the future. So remember that as you're in this situation, situation that feels really overwhelming sometimes? What can you learn from this? What opportunities exist? Don't let this defeat you. Let it make you stronger. You guys are what is leading this country, and I am so proud to call myself an educator alongside you.
Tabitha, we are awfully proud of you and of this entire panel. I just have to say what a treat. I have been looking forward to this conversation in a way that I don't always. Not that I don't look forward to our conversations, but this is such a phenomenal panel, and I knew even from our planning conversation what a great and rich discussion this was going to be. So I want to thank all of you, Secretary Barbara Cooper of Alabama's Department of Early Childhood Education, Tamara Johnson of the NACE Governing Board and Maleka Early Learning Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Superintendent Edward Manuzak of the Dundee Community Schools in Dundee, Michigan, and from Winfield, Kansas, our National Teacher of the Year, Tabitha Russ. Boy, it was a really special treat to have all four of you with us tonight. I hate for this conversation to end. I do want, as we are wrapping up, to let you know that we have a couple of upcoming early childhood webinars that we hope that maybe you'll take the time to join us for those as well. The next of those is on Tuesday, October 27th. It'll be at 2 p.m. And this is the return of a series that we have been doing with early childhood philanthropy. They're talking with the major foundations that are helping to fund this work. We'll be joined by Dr. Gomez of the Heising Simons Foundation, Dr. Jacqueline Jones of the Foundation for Child Development, and Dr. Michael Weinberg of the Thornburg Foundation in New Mexico. So that's Tuesday the 27th at 2 p.m. and you can register for that now. And then finally, another conversation that I'm also really looking forward to, the election in November, no matter how it turns out, has the potential to very dramatically shape what at least federal policy looks like for the coming years for young children. And so in early December, Tuesday, December 8th, we have pulled together a really amazing expert panel to help us sort of debrief after the election what the results are going to mean likely in terms of early childhood policy. We'll be joined by Samara James, who is the president and CEO of the National Black Child Development Institute, Katie Ham, the Vice President of Early Childhood Policy at the Center for American Progress, and Sarah Ritling, who is the Executive Director of the First 5 Years Fund. So all terrific and knowledgeable analysts. So I am really looking forward to kind of getting their take on what the election results mean for young children as we look into 2021. With that, we're going to wrap up for tonight. Thank you so much. We know that this evening time slot is difficult for many. We thank you extra specially for taking time out of what we know you could have been cooking dinner. We hope you were cooking dinner while you were watching and doing all of those good things at home. But thank you for taking the time to join us, and we just look forward to seeing you again real soon. Again, thanks to our panel, and have a good night.
Thank you, Dan.
Good night, everyone.